Good morning or good afternoon as the case may be, and welcome to the Creating Utilities Analytics Roadmap webinar. This is one of a series of webinars we'll be doing about different aspects of making use of all of the data that utilities are being flooded with. We'll today be looking specifically at the example of customer analytics. This webinar is presented jointly by Business Intelligence as Service. Your speakers today are Paul Grabham, President and CEO of that firm, and myself, Warren Causey, President and CEO of Warren B. Causey Limited, a research, analysis, and advisory firm in the industry. As everyone is aware, there are multiple silos of data with different definitions. There's a growing storage of big data from AMI and other systems. There's concerns about data security. Much personal information is being captured but also needs to be secured. There's lack of data analysis skills in-house. A lot of utilities find themselves data rich but information poor. And nearly everyone agrees on an end state where the smart grid, smart consumer, smart home, and so forth are connected and data from all of those sources is useful. I was speaking with a utility CIO from a rather large utility just yesterday, and they're a little ahead of a lot of other utilities, their peers, and among the things that they've been able to achieve by having a set of dashboards internally and more than 100 reports from their AMI and customer data is over the last year they were able to reduce their charge-offs by more than $1 million because they had the data and had converted it into information to make all of that possible. Most utilities are looking at too many projects at the same time, and one of the purposes of this webinar is to encourage you to develop a roadmap that will lead you towards a place where that utility I was speaking with yesterday has already arrived. As you're aware, there's not only AMI data, billing data, load planning, health and safety issues, ERP, outage management, SCADA, energy usage, CRM, asset management, social media data, demand side management data. When I entered the utility industry a number of years ago, we were converting from paper files on customers into the first CIS systems. And you're all aware of just the explosion of data that has occurred since then. At this point, I want to turn the floor over to Paul Grabham, and he'll walk us through the rest of the presentation. Paul?
Okay, thanks, Warren. Yeah, so I guess the purpose of today is trying to develop a discussion around road mapping, and in particular what we've discovered over the last year in terms of working with 7 different U.S. electric utilities, where I think the focus for them around analytics is on the customer side. And on the customer side, I mean, really, again, there's multiple projects where people have taken on with utilities over the last couple years. Some are making large AMI investments. Others obviously made large billing implementation. Some have been implementing CRM, content management solutions. Some now are getting into understanding what the customer is saying about the utility on the outside, so trying to integrating external data. Other utilities are getting into demand-side management in terms of energy counseling with their customers. So there's a lot of new initiatives and not a lot of activities on the customer analytics side. But again, it's how do you prioritize and build that out? So what we've attempted to do is show what we've been doing in terms of helping some customers in terms of prioritizing the projects and understanding what are the projects which are important to them on the customer side and what they're able to build out now. So what we're saying is that people have potentially made large investments in billing systems. People have made potentially large smart meter investments. But have they started to integrate that information to provide a better understanding of the customer? So when we've been working with our customers, what we're trying to get everybody to realize is, where are you? What is supposedly best-in-class customer analytics? What does that involve? Where are we today compared to that? Like Warren was just explaining, with one utility, they seem to be pretty mature in terms of their analytics, being able to bring various different pieces of customer data together. So where do you want to be in that? Where in the various different utilities we work with, depending on their local priorities, have determined whether they're more interested in external data or just integrating their meter data. So in terms of what we've just tried to show here is a kind of a sequence or maturity curve, if you like, where in terms of customer analytics, we've got kind of 5 stages there. One being where you have the basic billing information for the customer, which is the once a month interaction for driving billing. 2, you have the integration of meter analytics, which brings with it another level of customer understanding. Also, there's a missing piece there, is that once you combine those two pieces of data, that's when the real value add is found. Third is when we're talking about bringing all the customer interactions together, so that if you're looking at one account, you know if there's been an outage, if there's customer billing inquiries, etc., and also their consumption. And then the last is coming to where people are actually integrating external sources. So I guess the question is, people looking at this, and when we've been working with people, they're deciding where are they on this curve, and probably the most that we work with fall into this transactional, I would say. So they have their billing and the ERP system in place, and then I would say a portion of those also have a smart meter investment. So really for these customers, the question is, where do I want to be in customer analytics? And, what are the projects that I'm looking at in terms of driving me in terms of better understanding of my customer? So we have customers which are working on creating integrated customer databases. That's not necessarily, to be honest, fancy technology. That's potentially using just SQL technology in terms of bringing together all the channels from which they integrate with their customers today. And that, in this one case, for example, that's a customer one system being integrated with an IVR. So, not necessarily the most leading technology, but they are trying to achieve the goal of 360 view of the customer in a very simple stepping stone way. The other is to integrate the AMI billing information. So when you have a customer, which we've been working with, which has 2 different technologies with a integrating billing system with a newly implemented series of meters, then once they're able to combine that information, they're able to get a lot of value in terms of understanding what the customer is using, what type of customer they are, and then improve the way they understand the customer. The last one in terms of another project in terms of integrating customer information. Now, one is social media, and there's a lot of been said and hyped about that, but effectively what it is, there are tools where utilities now are having projects to understand, for example, how the public in their area is viewing certain marketing or their customer service levels, and the utilities using that to see how they can improve how they are viewed. That's actually also being used by another utility that is using it as to gain public knowledge or understanding of how their energy production programs are working. Another use of external sources is things like Nielsen or legal public information, where if you want to know what kind of industrial customer you're dealing with so you can improve your marketing to them, and if you're able to integrate that with your billing system, you're able to then produce some very specific marketing and products for those customers. So what we're saying is there's a series of projects here of varying degrees of complexity, which the varying utilities we work to have taken on. So they're looking at A, either creating a 360-view database, B, they're looking to combine their billing and AMI data, or C, they're actually looking to combine external data. So how are you going to prioritize? So the first question is, how well do you know your customers? And then the second being is, how well do you want to know your customers? What, as a utility is driving you, how far do you need to go? And it really comes down to is how do you want to segment your customers? I think that is what's going to drive what customer project's going to be the most important to you. So again, the projects that you're looking at, which is the integrating the billing and the metadata, or the 360 view of the customer, or the external knowledge of the customer, trying to improve your customer segmentation. And really that comes down to going into building the roadmap is how do you prioritize that? Again, what I've said is if it's a customer with an existing AMI investment, the priority there is to drive value from that investment. So therefore, creating analytics, combining those two things, can provide a lot of value. Second is, I would say, the 360 view of the customer is possibly the simplest in terms of technology. It's a low impact in terms of organizational change, and the value add that you can gain is potentially very high. And then the second piece to that, which I would include, so you have the full understanding of the customer, is that once you have that 360 view of the customer, combining that with the consumption information of the AMI is especially important with a industrial customer. And then lastly is with the external sources of data, like I described, is that being a project where if you really are trying to understand the customer outside of what you know of them as a utility, but more what they are as a business or a person, then the external sources of data need to be included, which then brings into using external sources, but in a cloud environment. So what we've tried to put together there is that as a utility as a whole, there are a lot of projects for improvement. On the customer basis in itself, from the utilities that we've worked with, there's kind of three main areas in analytics for customer, and really it's balancing the priorities of the specific utility to work which of the initiatives need to be taken on first to get to the end goal of knowing the customer better so you can market different energy services to them. So Warren, that would be kind of where I was trying to go with the marketing, the roadmap discussion.
Okay, thank you, Paul. In developing a roadmap, I presume as we get further in, get the customer data integrated, then you would also have a similar roadmap for the other elements that utilities deal with, the transmission and distribution side, like the example I was speaking to yesterday, being able to integrate payment possibilities with information from the distribution side. A lot of utilities I've been speaking with are looking to integrate all of that. So where would you see a roadmap going beyond just the customer part to include those other elements from the T&D side?
Yeah, so I think this rolls up into what I would call an enterprise roadmap. And what we just discussed there was a part of that, which is the customer-facing piece, if you like. And I think, go back to the slide where we started with, where you were kind of introducing. What I purposely did here was show, like as you're saying, in terms of analytics, there is a very large scope of things which are on the plate right now. Within just customer, as I was showing, there was an attempt at prioritizing and come up with steps to move the ball forward in the customer area. And then again, you'd have to do the same on the operational side for integrating AMI with equipment data, for example. So
Okay.
you would build a roadmap again for operational analytics too.
Right. One of the things that I get a lot of interest in my practice, and there's a lot of buzz out there about social media. For example, I know of one utility. It happens to be a fairly large municipal. In fact, I did a survey on this recently, and most utilities now have between 1 and 5 people who are dedicated to interacting with the public through social media. And one large IOU had 10 people dedicated to that. What elements of social media do you see as deriving value to utilities by being able to track that?
You know, it's funny you said that actually, because I remember at the Georgia Co-op meeting that I attended, I was talking to somebody specifically who was responsible for their Facebook image. They didn't realize how powerful it was socially within their region because of outages, for example. But yeah, no, actually, I think that is what has made utilities, I think, realize that there is a lot of power available to them if they're able to use it. And I would be so bold to say is that I do think people are experimenting using some of the newer technology available where you are able to sift through a very high volume, I guess, which is what people call big data. So it's another big term, but basically social media potentially provides big data. And then that big data allows the utility with certain tools to assess basically people's feelings towards certain events. So you can potentially, the idea is that you can mine people's activities on a social way to understand how they feel about certain programs, for example, that you're trying to push through. For example, there's one utility in the Northwest basically is working on trying to use social media data to understand how people are responding to energy conservation programs. So really, I would say that is there an ROI? Have people determined that this is the best thing since sliced bread in terms of understanding your customer? I don't think so. But I do think that the availability of this information is proving that A, you can get a message out there very easily, and B, is you can understand what people are saying, and potentially you can respond to that.
Okay. Demand-side management seems to be an evolving, shall we say, concept, particularly on the residential side. As most people are aware, industrial and commercial organizations have been participating in demand-side management for a long time. The interactions there are fairly complex. The utility can send a curtailment notice, and the big plant or big business will curtail, and then there are financial incentives for them to do so, lower rates and so forth. On the residential side, from what I'm seeing in the industry, the penetration has not been that extensive, but various regulatory agencies and other organizations are pushing it. Do you see demand-side management as being a significant player in the industry over the next few years, Paul?
From what I've seen, I think in what I would say, the more energy conservative states, if is that the right word to say, but more left-leaning states, I think, where energy conservation is more politically driven as well. I think demand-side management is still very much a high priority. I think that in general, I would say across the board, no. I would say no, I don't think it is, but I think it is a trend in general that utilities are accepting that a greater understanding of the customer is needed, regardless of whether you're going to go down the demand-side management path or not.
Okay. Developing a roadmap, as you've described here, can be a relatively simple thing, but it gets into more complexity as you get involved in it. For example, CRM and AMI, billing, and the customer database. involves a great number of interactions and of everything from the weather to the economy playing into all those interactions. How do you go about accounting for those in analytics and building those variabilities in?
Yeah, I tell you what was an interesting observation actually, and I hope I don't get shot for saying this, but I was at the sales kickoff meeting earlier actually last week for SAP for the year, and they were discussing kind of like the use cases for where analytics needs to be, if you like. And, you know, they were discussing things obviously that A would drive a lot of license revenue, but B being kind of what I would view very progressive, very things in the future related to how AMI can help with outage management, for example, stuff like that, right? And I think, yeah, that's great. However, I think there is to my mind, there is a lot of value to be driven out of improved analytics within utilities based on the fact, go back to your original statements of we have a lot of silos, for example. So I think, you know, the fact that data storage is a lot cheaper today and that the tools are a lot more advanced, that with a lot of existing technology, you can derive a lot of value out of a lot of the IT investments that have been made today. So I'll give you a good example is one of the value engineers from SAP was presenting that there were some initiatives that you could do around workforce management, et cetera, that could improve customer service. But they were very high impact in terms of organizational change, you know, so you're talking about very large implementations, you know. But there was one item which they didn't really discuss, which was very high impact, but the easiest to achieve, and that was customer segmentation. And customer segmentation, to be honest, all that is a better understanding of your customer. And I go back to the message I was trying to get across is, what is the information that we're the most comfortable in using in terms of better understanding our customer? And then what are we going to do with it, you know, as an organization? I think that drives then what you would want to do in the customer side. You know, I go back to people have dropped, you know, a few $1 million on hardware for AMI, then, you know, the value obviously of combining that information with what you've got in your billing system is very, very powerful, and you can do a lot of value add with C&I customers, you know, overnight, you know. But so I would say is that in terms of road mapping and analytics, and in this case customer, I think it's less on new tools. It's more on using existing tools that you can drive value across all these silos.
Okay, well, I'm talking again about a couple of utilities that I've been speaking with recently. One utility consists of about 500,000 customers, I suppose, indicated that they happen to be using SAP's business objects. They're using it on top of an Oracle CIS, and also have tied it into AMI and some of their T&D sides. And their indication was that they had about 100 reports altogether. And these rolled up into 7 to 10 screens that different executives could see. Is that fairly typical for how an analytics system would provide data to senior executives?
Yeah, so I think what these guys, it sounds as though that they've got a business objects installation, which is a system which is fairly agnostic in terms of where it gets its data from. And it has a dashboarding tool. I think that's what you're looking for, right?
That's the word. A dashboard, yes.
Right, so a dashboard or a cockpit in terms of for the executive. And the idea is that obviously you're presenting data which is summarized up, but also represents a lot of the detailed transactions that have happened. And then you're only trying to send certain KPIs to the executives so they're focusing their opinion. So It sounds as though they're fairly advanced in terms of doing that, which is, running dashboards on top of the multiple systems. I would put them, in kind of this chart way up there on the leading by far.
Okay. We do have a question now. It's how are utilities making the business case for customer analytics? Where's the payback? Well, I mentioned one payback from one utility, and I know some others that are doing the same thing. Reducing charge-offs by $1 million over 1 year is a considerable payback. Paul, do you have some other examples?
Yeah, I would say that customer service is a intangible, which I think is a positive that most of the utilities want to improve on. I think if the segmentation is focused on industrial customers too, I think the improved revenue and collections that you can get from that in itself can show the business case.
I also would note that among all the large systems that utilities install, CIS, GIS, everything else, analytics are relatively inexpensive to go collecting all of that information. The information is already available to the utility, but making adequate use of it requires an analytics system that has access to all of that. We don't want to get into specific pricing, but generally, Paul, is that a good characterization? You don't, for an analytics system, you don't pay what you would pay for a CIS or a GIS or a work management or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the idea would be a fraction of that. And the idea is that, again, what we're trying to show here is that you can do actionable projects so that the project costs are kept to a minimum and that each stands on their own ROI, if you like, their own business case. So going back to the question is, how do these projects support themselves? I think each one of those, I kind of gave 3 different projects. One was 360 view of the customer, the second was the smart grid integration on billing, and the third on the social media. I would have thought the first 2 are fairly easy to define a business case based on potential improved revenue, etc. And then you can track it using the analytics product that you're delivering. And in this case, for doing, the cost of doing these projects can be, a lot lower if they're using more of a software as a service as well. So.
Okay. Yeah, are there any other questions out there we could answer?
Yeah, there's another one on there. Yeah. It says, my CIS and work management applications are very old and my executive management desires better reporting, especially in the areas of metrics, dashboards, etc. So how do I solve the wants and wishes of management without a major investment in tools? You know what, this is actually a common situation. I think one example I gave there was that we have one customer where they are using like a customer one billing system and they've got these other customer-facing applications. They haven't made the transition, for example, like I'm showing here, of a integrated billing system yet. So I would say, to some degree, in terms of their understanding of customer analytics, I would say they're below the aware here. In terms of not making major investments in tools, etc., I think this is in parallel again to that example, where in our case, in BIAS, we offer a tool of using business objects in the cloud where the customer can prototype and get a proof of concept working pretty cheaply and quickly. So in that case, they used our cloud proof of concept tool to do that. And then they can then have an in-house version of business objects because they don't want their data necessarily to be in the cloud. So therefore, the installation gets put inside their firewall. So effectively, that's why we've been promoting this roadmap process, is that through working with us as BIAS, we don't drive the massive capex up front. We're driving more to find the proof of concept, to find the business case, and then implement internally. So I agree with, I think there's a lot of value to be gotten out of the legacy implementations which are there, with improved analytics. And the point is, with analytics, you budget-wise, you're looking a lot less than you, like Warren was insinuating, for traditional CIS implementation. I think what we're looking at is projects which are in the tens of thousands, not in the traditional, tens of millions.
And there are still a lot of legacy systems out there. You're certainly not alone. A lot of utilities have older systems, and with the advance of technology these days, something that's 10 or 15 years old is almost legacy on the CIS side. Actually, I look at analytics as a way of even possibly extending the life of those systems, because it will provide you with the data to make better use of the information you already have available in those legacy systems. And there was a follow-up question. Yes, the project budget for analytics can be in the tens of thousands rather than tens of millions, as sometimes you put into a new CIS or other major system that utilities may have.
Yeah, I would add to that in that I was kind of using the case study of 7 electric utilities in the US that we've been working with. I would say all of them have either an SAP or an Oracle investment in the back end there somewhere. On the customer side, it varies depending on their investments, whether some are using like an old legacy versus others which are on a newer version of SAP or Oracle. I would say the approach here in terms of to reiterate is that if you take a scalable approach, i.e. do analytics around, say, billing, even if it is a legacy billing solution, I think you can provide a lot of value. I think, if you use a analytics solution that can be scaled across different applications, even better, because then you can start building cross-functional reporting easier. So that's where I think the approach of road mapping, if you are prioritizing business benefit, but with some kind of architectural design in the background, you can build out improved reporting with some BI tools around your existing IT investments, and then effectively pull together these cross-system databases which provide the business value. So, yeah, to reiterate, I don't think you need to have these massive programs anymore. I think there just needs to be a commitment to improve analytics, and that requires some different thinking around analytics, but also using some analytics tools. And those tools don't need to be running in the tens of millions. That's what we're talking about. Value can be added by spending the tens of thousands.
And I had another question here. Basically, is there a difference between the smaller and larger utilities as far as the value they get out of analytics? For example, do smaller utilities realize benefits in different areas as opposed to larger ones? I would say generally the answer to that is maybe. Large utilities, I will tell you from looking at their IT systems for a number of years, tend to be scattered all over everywhere. I was talking to one very large utility, I won't say exactly where, but it was on the West Coast, and they had a BI system. But that BI system worked only in one small division of one small category and was not across the whole enterprise. Smaller utilities tend to be a bit more holistic in that it's easier for them to combine data and information from different parts of their operations without having to reach out into the hinterlands and pull up some discrete implementation of BI somewhere.
Yeah, I would add to that and say that the most efficient, I would say, in terms of analytics would be the larger co-ops, which had made the larger IT investments. So, without naming them, but there's one around our area in DC Metro, there's one Southeast, and there's one in Northwest that we interact with, and they, I would say, are way ahead in terms of looking to understand the customer externally, but also they've put in the billing systems, they've also made some AMI investment, and to be honest, they were using some of the analytics tools that we discussed, for example, business objects. A lot of the utilities were using business objects without really knowing the power of what it can do, because it was just providing silo reporting on top of their Oracle implementation, say. So that's what's quite funny, actually. That's what I was kind of talking about in terms of the investment being 10K and not necessarily 10 million, is that in those three examples, which are essentially large co-ops and very profitable, they're all using, say, business objects on top of, say, Oracle or other MDM or something to provide point analytics, better analytics for point solutions, but without realizing the benefit that they can use it to pull together the different sources. So what's interesting is a lot of people actually already own these tools. So it's really kind of just having an understanding of pulling the data across the silos is where you actually start to receive the benefit. And that's where, what our experience at least, is that you're not requiring large, heavy investments again. It's more focused on pulling together these cross-functional databases.
Absolutely, and as Paul pointed out, that's often easier to accomplish on a smaller utility. We have another question. It's, do we have any slides addressing analytics from a technical side? By this I mean network monitoring, outage management, and so forth. Yes, we do. We don't have them loaded and can't show them to you now, but if you'll drop an email to Paul or myself, we'll get you some information on that. My email is warren@wbcausey, wbcausey.com. And Paul, why don't you give him yours?
Yeah, but I mean, what I would say is that this is a series of webinars that Warren said, and I think one of them will start demoing some of the dashboard stuff that Warren was discussing when he was interviewing a local CIO to him. We'll go through some of the utility dashboards which are available for network management, like you're discussing, for outages, etc. We can do that. Or you can actually just go to mybias.com and you can actually sign up for there's dashboards in there that you can see as well. So that's just mybias.com. I think that's the real big message here, and this may be not the message utilities are getting from software vendors, is that I think a lot of value can be driven from the existing investments which are there, or just extensions from what IT investments you've already made. And to be honest, that's where the real value is actually creating that cross-functional data. And, through, with us at Bias at least, we're able to get the value out of the tools that you have merely by creating the 360 view, for example, or the cross-functional view of the customer, and actually using that to your business and benefit. And the idea being is that you can actually get some of this up and running in the space of a few weeks, not making it years, because you're leveraging infrastructure that's already there.
Absolutely. If there are no more questions, Paul, do you want to kind of summarize the idea of building an analytics roadmap?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess what we were trying to do is have an open discussion of customer analytics in general for utilities, and really moving the ball forward. How can the utility drive value without necessarily making large additional investments in IT? I think what hopefully we've been able to show is how we've been able to help some of our customers move forward and get a better understanding of their customers, which does vary by them. And, we would suggest you do reach out either to Warren or myself, and, we'll have an open dialogue which is not based on software sales, but more on providing value within a utility, having improved analytics. And I think, we've been able to prove, and hopefully we can show in this series of webinars, is how you can derive that customer value through analytics.
And we did have one last question come in. To what extent do you see customer data privacy issues being a hindrance to accurately collecting data? Actually, that's a two-edged sword, but generally it is not a great hindrance. You are required to keep the customer data, identifying data, private, but you have it within the utility. It's when you start crossing the utility into the general world boundary that you get into problems there. Once again, we thank everyone for joining us, and as Paul mentioned, this will be a series of webinars over the next few months, and we hope you will join us for the next one. Our email addresses and Paul's phone number is up there. Call us or send us email, and we'll get back with you as quickly as possible. Thank you very much.